Hi guys, and welcome to Faewood. So this is the next video in my dark crystal costume, and I really wanted to make one of the Mystics prayer sticks. So I have the book that was done by Faewood and has all the imagery from the dark crystal. So I went and had a look at all the different versions of the prayer sticks because he's got a number of different sketches and things about what they might look like, and I really liked the look of this one you see on the screen here. So I started with some foil as a base, to build up the shape and start moulding it how I want it. Foil is really good like this because it's nice and lightweight and mouldable. It's good to use underneath other things when you're sculpting something or building something out. Now I wanted it to be nice and strong, so I had this piece of cane left over from when I made my lantern. You could use anything here that was structural, like a piece of dowel. You could even use a stick or something like that, but you just want something in there to keep it structural. And then I started to build the foil around this as well, just to get the shape and add some strength for the top of the prayer stick and the bottom, just holding it all together there. Now you do want to push the foil in nice and tight as you mould it and not leave it too loose, otherwise when you put the additional coats of things over the top, it could crack and you don't want that. So push it in nice and fairly firm. It doesn't have to be as tight as you can compact it, but make sure it's fairly tight that it's not going to go anywhere. So I built a little rock that sits on top of the prayer stick, and then I wanted actually an additional one. At this point when I was making it, I wasn't sure if I'd put it on the prayer stick or I would just hang it from my costume somewhere, but I wanted one of the stones that you see on some of the other prayer sticks that have a little hole in them and look quite smooth and almost like a river stone. Okay, so to build this up, I've got this multi-purpose filler, and it's really fantastic stuff to sculpt with. It's just basically a plaster multi-purpose filler. Now you could do this with all sorts of different fillers like this. I haven't tried the plaster base coat, but I think that could also work because it's nice and strong but also sandable. So that's really what you're after, something that's easy to mould and sandable. And this comes from your hardware store, so I bought this at Bunnings, and you can see, it's just a multi-purpose mouldable filler. And I just use a little spatula there. It's actually a wax carving tool that I have. You could just use a popsicle stick or what have you just to start applying it. And it's quite rough to start with, it's not going to be entirely smooth, but that's fine because it's sandable and somewhat mouldable actually. Even after, before it had dried, I actually came and had a look at it, and I was able to smooth some parts of it down before it dried up. So that's an option as well, you know, depending on the type of material that you use, you may actually be able to come back an hour or 2 hours later and mold it a bit further before it fully sets, and then you can go in with the sander and sand things. So you can see the shape starting to build up nicely there. So I was pretty happy with this first coat, but I did do some additional coats after that as well. Now, I sand it down, but this is just roughly, because I am going to put at least one more coat on here. You can put as many coats as you feel you need, and I think you'll definitely at least need 2 coats. It's pretty hard to get it perfect in one coat because you know, you sort of need to build certain parts up sometimes and let it dry before you sort of start adding to it. Now, I was a little bit concerned about the strength of this filler because it was so lightweight and there was a little bit of cracking happening at the top there. I think that was the way that I attached the foil to my piece of dowel there, was just allowing a bit of movement and a bit of cracking. So I used PVA glue, and I had this this is actually a fabric backing, like a beading, iron-on beading foundation for putting on material. I just used this because it was what I had on hand, but what I would say is just use a really thin, lightweight material or a tissue paper for this part. Tissue paper would work perfectly. It's just adding a different layer of, so the material is going to hold together, the PVA is going to really adhere a layer of material over the top of this filler, and then it's not going to crack as easily because this sort of material is going to hold together in a different way than the plaster. So it does help to, if you want a lot of strength in the piece, and I did want this to last, you know, so I would definitely do a layer of this. And then to get the texture smooth again, I've gone over it one more time with the multi-purpose filler. Now, what I did in this coat was actually go over the filler with my paintbrush and a little bit of water on it, and that really allowed me to smooth this layer out a lot more than if I had have waited for it to dry, because this, you know, saves a bit of time for sanding and things like that. So you could definitely do this. I think it's a bit easier to do this sort of thing on the second coat though, because a brush might sort of brush all the thickness away that you apply if you do the first coat this way. But you could definitely give that a try and use a paintbrush to get that nice smooth texture. And I still wanted to sand some parts of it anyway, because you're not going to get it perfect, but that's the beauty of this stuff. And any of the plaster type fillers or, you know, base coat plaster and things like that, is you can sand it. So I'm just using an acrylic paint here. And I mixed a sort of deep brown to start with. And I'm painting the rocks. Both rocks I paint slightly different shades of grey. One I do this sort of slightly brown grey, like a mushroom colour. And the other one is more of a cool, darker grey. Just to make it a bit more natural, I guess, because rocks aren't all going to be the same colour. Now I really need this to look aged, so I'm going over it with a dry brush and a lighter brown colour. If you have a think about what aged wood looks like, a lot of times it goes a bit of a grey colour or a lighter brown. It doesn't have that same richness, but I wanted to start off with a darker colour so little bits of that could peek through. I also added a little bit of the carving detail at the top just by doing little black swirls and little black lines. It's quite a simple design that they have on the prayer sticks, just lots of swirls and line work and stuff. And then I go over that again with a dry brush and another kind of grey browny colour, just again to add that worn look. You know, I want the wood to look like it's almost been bleached by age. I did need to just touch up this detailed work a little bit more. It's, yeah, quite simple work, just lines and swirls as you can see there. If I had more time, I might have even tried to make it actually carved into the plasterwork, and you could definitely give that a go. But I wasn't really sure how I would go doing something that technically detailed. You'd probably need to build up your plaster a fair bit to be able to then have those lines carved in. Now I kept these rocks looking somewhat rough and then dry brushed a slightly different grey on top to add some more texture and a bit of a natural look to the stones. Now I had this really awesome burlap ribbon on hand just that I was using for some of my packaging and things, and it was just perfect because it looked pretty much spot on to what was on the prayer stick in the picture. And I just start wrapping it around the base just like the picture had, and just overlapping it. And you've got to think this would be done quite roughly. This was a primitive looking stick, and this would be the repair to that prayer stick, or just adding strength to a prayer stick or something like that. So I didn't try and keep it uniform or anything like that. I've kept it really rough looking and haphazard looking. So again, in the picture, the rock is attached to the top of the prayer stick. So I use a bit of hot glue, but then I also mimic the picture in wrapping it with some leather straps. I had some scrap leather. I used to use that for a lot of my jewellery, and so I just cut some strips of that to wrap this around. And then I just hot glued a few different rocks and things on there, because a lot of the prayer sticks that were in the pictures had, you know, just little details, little rocks, little beads and, you know, rustic looking things stuck on it or wrapped around it. So again, I'm using the same leather to attach the other rock, and I decide I want to hang it from the prayer stick on the other side. So I hot glue it, and then to add some extra strength, I hot glued the join and then wrapped another piece of leather around the join all the way up, and I liked this because of the detail of it as well. I also decided to wrap some leather around the base of the prayer stick as well. And to add some extra texture, I tied a piece on as well, because there was a little bit sort of tied onto one of them, and I liked the way that looked, and I thought that would add a bit more of the rustic, authentic look to it. And a few more beads and stones and things on there. And then that's the finished piece. I hope you've enjoyed this video and used these techniques for yourself. Make sure to hit subscribe, because there's more to come with that. Thanks for visiting Faewood, and we'll see you next time. Bye guys.